Hey, I'm Laura. Welcome to LauraGyoga. This is our third week of talking about the koshas. So we're on the third kosha, which is the Manomaya Kosha, or the mind sheath. And this is such an important aspect of our being. When you start to practice yoga for a while, and you get used to doing the physical postures, of course there's an adjustment period to just learning how to do the postures. In the beginning, you're really focused on what the names are and where your body is supposed to be, what you're supposed to be doing. Once you get a hang of that and you start to connect to your breath, which would be your Pranamaya Kosha, so you get that physical and that energetic level lined up, then you start to notice that your mind can really pull you away from your practice when you're on your mat. You will think about all sorts of crazy things, anything from what you did at work that day to what you need to go grocery shopping for, or maybe you're a little hungry and you start thinking about what you're going to make for dinner. There's a lot of different things that are going to pull you out of the present moment because of the chatter and the constant activity that happens in the Manomaya Kosha. And this constant activity, sometimes we call it a monkey mind. It's the mind that jumps from topic to topic rather than focusing on one specific thing. This can be an issue not just when we're doing our yoga practice, but when you're at work. If you're having trouble focusing on whatever project you're trying to do, or having a conversation with someone and your mind is wandering, you're really not listening to what they're saying. Those would kind of be examples of things where our mind isn't really trained well, that we have this habit of extra chatter that really isn't helping us with the task that's at hand. The Manomaya Kosha is really made up of a lot of different things. So it's not just our thoughts. It's our thoughts, it's ideas, it's judgments, it's dogmas, it's the rules that we follow, it's the things that we know to be true in society, the way that we're brought up, the way that we're expected to conduct ourselves, are all these constructs that are in our mind. And in yoga we have this saying that habits are called something called Samskaras. So Samskaras are thought of as like grooves. So if you think about walking a path across your front yard every day back and forth, you would start to wear away the grass, and then some of the dirt would start to wear away until there was this groove there. You could see exactly where you walked back and forth every day. And the more that you did that, the stronger that pattern or that groove in the ground would become. So we think of that as a samskara in our thought process. If you have a tendency to have harsh or critical self-talk, maybe you tell yourself that you're not good enough, or you don't look good today, or whatever it might be that your personal habit is, every time that you have that thought pattern and you allow it to be there, it gets stronger, and that samskara becomes more entrenched. So we want to watch our thought pattern really carefully. And then we do this process called thought editing. If there is a thought that we like and it should be there and it's productive and it's helping us during our day, then we leave that thought alone and we let it do its thing. But if there's a thought that is something that's like self-judgment or self-critical negativity, we want to push that thought out. We don't want it to stay too long because it's going to make that samskara stronger. We don't want that to happen. So we have a few different options. We can replace it with a mantra. We can create another thought that we want to put in its place. We can use affirmations, all sorts of little tools that we have to steer our thoughts in the direction that we want them to go. But a big part of this process is just watching. So we all get in a bad mood sometimes. This happened to me the other morning. I kind of woke up and I just wasn't in my normal frame of mind. And as I'm driving to work, I'm thinking about all of these things that I'm worried about, or that might go wrong, or that I might have to handle. And my first few minutes of my drive, I was really entrenched in all of these heavy things that are going on in my life. And then I started to notice the pattern that was being created and kind of the frame of mind that I was in. And I thought, oh my gosh, let me step back and kind of watch what my mind is doing. Watch the state that I woke up in this morning. And once I did that, and I was able to kind of detach myself from that negative pattern that I found myself in, then I found it a lot easier to steer myself in other directions. And I used a lot of the practices that I've used in yoga for years. I did some mantras, I put the radio on and listened to some music, something that was uplifting and upbeat. I did a little bit of breathing exercises, and then those things helped me to break that samskara that I was in, so that the rest of the day I didn't follow that strange negative thought pattern. So we start to learn these tools in our practice, and one of the big ones is mantra and affirmations. And the saying that I like to use with this is that we want to plant seeds that we want to grow. If you're trying to grow a lawn, you're not going to throw crabgrass seeds all over the place, because most people don't want crabgrass. But you're going to throw down whatever it is, Kentucky bluegrass, or whatever kind of grass you want to grow, whatever that plant is that you want to come out of the ground. The same thing happens with our mind. If we let those negative seed thoughts stay planted and we don't pull them out, they're going to start to grow, and we're going to have this whole blossoming of negativity. Whereas if we plant the seeds that we want to grow, like if we have an affirmation, a simple phrase like, I am enough, or I am worthy, and you plant that thought into your mind when you want to push out some other negative thought pattern, this is the seed that's going to grow. That's the one that you're allowing to stay in that surface of your mind, and you're going to water it, and you're going to take care of it. So these are the thoughts that are going to be more prolific. You're always going to have a weed here and there that you have to pull, but the more that you plant these seeds, the better your crop is going to be. So make sure that the seeds that you are planting are the ones that you actually want to nurture and to grow into full-grown plants. When we think about judgments and some of the dogma that can come up, and unfortunately even in yoga, we think of it as a system that hopefully would be without dogma, but the reality is that you do start to see some things where there are these really strict regimented rules where things have to be a certain way in certain schools of yoga, not all of them. But this is where suffering starts to come up, when we cross over into judgment. And I'll say this a lot in my yoga class, when we're doing our warm-up and we're doing our centering, that's your time to connect to your body and to notice, what does my body feel like right now? And especially since my class is in the evening, you've gone through your whole day and gone to work and been in the car and done family things. So at the end of the day, we have this residue of whatever we did during the day and whatever has stuck to us. Maybe we were in the car for a while and our hips and our hamstrings are tight. So as you start to do your first few movements in your centering, you're noticing, what do my hamstrings feel like today? What did I do today that has affected my body this way? You start to build this connection of cause and effect, but you want to stop it at a certain level. So you notice, oh, my hamstrings are a little bit tight. I can't go as deep into my forward bend as I normally could. And then you don't push into that judgment, and that would be like taking the next step and thinking, oh, why am I not going to yoga more? I really need to do my practice more. I've just been lazy. So that's the space where you hop into judgment. You want to kind of stop at that level right before it, where you're just noticing the facts, you're noticing the information, you're building the connections of cause and effect, but don't take that leap into judging the situation that you're in, because it is what it is. And that is just going to bring up suffering and make your hamstrings tighter because you're feeling stressed. So that's a little loop that you want to watch out for. The quote that I put over here on the board was something that I felt very strongly connected to this idea of the Manomaya Kosha. The quote says, your body hears everything your mind says. And we all know that we say things in our mind that we would never dare articulate out loud. And a lot of those things are directed at ourselves. Sometimes they're directed at other people, but a lot of times they're directed at ourselves. We're really hard on ourselves. And there's this very important concept that we try to grasp, that our thoughts are incredibly powerful. Your thoughts have a ripple effect to every other system in your body. All you have to do is think something, And immediately there's a physiological reaction, there's a chemical reaction in your body that results from that thought. And if you are somebody who believes strongly in The Secret, if you ever read The Secret, it's all about manifesting things. If you can hold your mind on a specific thought for a long enough period of time, you can actually manifest that thing into your life. So your thoughts are this incredibly powerful thing that send this ripple effect out into the universe. Even though you are not articulating something out loud, everything else around you still picks up on that vibration. The example of this that I like to use is thinking about biting into a lemon. If you had a slice of lemon, and picture it as strongly as you can, picture it in detail, what the lemon would smell like, how juicy it would be, and then imagine biting into it and what would happen. So usually there is this immediate response of creating saliva. And this is an interesting way of demonstrating that your mind can create this image, and your body will react as if there's a real lemon that you're holding and you're biting into. Even though there is no lemon, your body still had that same response. So if you think about some of the things that you worry about, if you're in a fear pattern about losing your job, and you have a lot of anxiety about money and things like that, even if you never get to the point where you lose your job, all of that fear that you were holding on to creates the same physiological response as if it actually happened or close to it, without the event ever actually coming to fruition. So your body still goes through all that trauma of having the stress and having the worry that I might lose my job, I might not be able to pay my bills, and all of that starts to accumulate as if it was actually a fact in your life, because the thoughts are so strong that they're having that same impact on your body. We want to be very aware of this connection between the Manomaya Kosha, the thought process, and the physical body, the Annamaya Kosha. And it's one of those things that during your practice you're watching what your mental state was during the day and what the result is in your body. How does your body feel when you're doing your practice on a day where you felt really open and light and happy versus a day where you were stuck in a pattern of fear or worry? What's the physical difference in your body on those two different days? That's an important learning process as you go through the scope of doing yoga day to day. Now over here, I wrote down the second Yoga Sutra. And the second Yoga Sutra kind of sums yoga up in a neat little package. And it says that yoga is the stilling of the changing states of the mind. And sometimes I'll have my students picture their mind like the surface of a very still lake. Every time a thought comes up to the surface, it creates these waves, it creates these ripples. And we think of that as the changing states of the mind, those waves that are created. Now, as that thought starts to dissipate and you let it go, then that lake goes back to this glassy, still surface again. And then another thought will come up in a few moments and the ripples will come back. So it's this constant process of watching how the thoughts create waves and how we can either attach to them and feed into them, add information onto them, or we can sort of let them float away and let the surface of the mind become still again. It's definitely a practice in patience, and you have to be connected to the sense of it being a journey, because in the beginning you have to constantly let go of thoughts, and it feels like they're coming up back to back. But the more that you practice this, the spaces in between your thoughts are going to get longer, and you're going to be able to bring yourself back into that stillness more quickly and with less effort. But it does take an amount of practice to get to that point. But understand that this is yoga in its core. When we are unchanged, or we are able to still all of these changing states, that is what yoga actually is, the stilling of the changing states of the mind, when we reach that point of steadiness and equanimity. In the Yoga Sutras, it's called Chitta Vritti Nirodha. So you'll see that in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. It's the second one. For the practice that we're going to do to work on the Manomaya Kosha, I picked a focus on the lower back, the hips, and the hamstrings, because these are physical areas in our body where if you are in a fear pattern, or if you're having a lot of negativity in your life or in your thought process, these are the areas of the body that we physically tend to hold on to, that we start to stiffen up the lower back, the hips tend to bind up, and the hamstrings will start to shorten, because part of that is that we're preparing for a fight or flight response. Our big bulky muscles are getting ready to react in some way, so they start to hold tension so that they can create that response if we need to either fight to defend ourselves or we need to be able to run away. But the problem is that most of the time we never have that physical exertion that goes along with the anxiety or the fear that the mind was creating. So all of that starts to build up. A big part of what we do in our yoga practice is understand our response to different situations. We all know that some people have a really high resilience for stress. They might have 18 different projects that they're juggling and they look cool as a cucumber, no problem. Whereas somebody else might have 3 projects that they're juggling, and to them that is overwhelming and they're struggling to keep everything together and lined up and doing what they need to do. It's a very subjective kind of thing, stress. One event might happen to 2 different people. So say your car breaks down, and this happens to 2 separate people. The first person sees it as a catastrophic thing and starts thinking about how they're going to have all these bills and it's going to be a huge issue and they're not going to be able to pay their rent that month, and it snowballs into this giant sense of urgency and worry. Whereas the other person in the exact same situation, having their car break down, might kind of take it in stride and think, okay, things are always going to break. This is something that we knew was going to happen eventually, and I'm just going to count it in as a different part of my day and try to stay flexible. So there's these very different ways of assessing the exact same situation, where people have different ways of judging it and labeling it. And that has a lot to do with the way that our Manomaya Kosha works. It has a lot to do with the Samskaras that we have. Some of us have patterns where we tend to immediately be really reactive to things, where yoga teaches us to take a little bit of a step back, and before we have that immediate reaction, try to reassess the situation and bring ourselves into a calmer, more stable place, so that we can look at it more objectively and not have that strong reaction to it initially. But that's the difference between stressful events. The event itself is not innately stressful. It's our judgment and it's our assessment of that situation that either makes it something hugely stressful or something that's just a slight inconvenience. And we can train ourselves over time to move from the highly reactive state to the more moderate state of handling issues and challenges. So with our practice, we're going to do some different variations of poses that are going to work on this central area of the body where we hold that tension, and worry and anxiety tend to plant itself. So I hope that you can join us for the next video, where we'll do our practice for the Manomaya Kosha. Thank you so much for watching. Namaste.